Okay, welcome back to primitive mycology. Um, our straw is drained. It's at its proper holding capacity. Um, I've actually uncovered one bucket because it's super fucking windy today, and it actually blew the tripod over. Anyways, let's get to it here. So today we've got uh, Porotus pulmonarius, the brown summer oyster. Some people call it the giant oyster. Others call it, I think some people call it like the Florida oyster, or that might be something a little different. I've heard it referred to as that. It doesn't really matter. It's a brown oyster. It's a pulmonarius. And we got Porotus columbinus. And actually, I believe that I left the scissors in the house. So give me just a moment. I'll pause this here, and I'll be right back. Okay, back here. As far as the scissors go, because these are being used outside, I grabbed the shittiest pair that I have. Definitely not the ones that I use at the flow hood. Even though, they can be sanitized, and then the edges of the blade, you could really give them like a light flame sterilization. There really isn't like any sense in doing that. I would rather just use a shitty kitchen pair because I'm doing this outside. We're gonna start with Porotus columbinus. Now we still do want to be, kind of half-assed clean here. Even though we're outside and like everything we're doing wrong right now, we do definitely want to stay, sort of clean at least. Give another wipe down here. Yeah, the wind is like atrocious today, man. Blowing all kinds of shit over in the yard. Blowing my bags over. Tripod over. All kind of shit today. But at least that guy lay down there. And here's the bags that I was talking about. Check these things out, man. They're 40 inches tall and 18 inches wide. These will hold a lot. It's been a while since I used bags this size. I never fill these like 100% because you've got to be able to close them too. But it's possible. I may not even have enough straw right here. And that's fine. If it's only one and then I got to soak again, it's not like the end of the world. So, just like you would with anything else, you want to break up your straw. This columbinus right here started to auto fruit off the top of the grain in the bag. So kind of what I'm doing here is I'm breaking it up, but not like a big break and shake like you normally would. I don't want very many, if any, of these auto fruits in the bag. Although they are, technically, they're sterile. They're in a bag of sterile colonized grain. They still can like cause you some problems later. But essentially, if some of them do fall in there, or even if you decided to put them all in there, it's basically like you're cloning, just cloning the genetics that's already there. They're clean, but the problem is the breakdown that they go through. So like when you throw these guys in there, they are going to break down much faster than that grain, and it's not like a guarantee they're going to cause you a problem. I've gotten away with it many times, like getting in a hurry and just kind of like chuck it in there. It's definitely not the end of the world. We're going to put our hands in this anyway. But yeah, these auto fruits right here, that's kind of funny. We're going to go ahead and throw them in the bag because, it's kind of late. Just going to lean it over there. At this point, you know, the idea of all your sterility, that shit's over with. Um, you know, this is kind of like one of them deals where now it's in the hands of the fungus. You know, and like I say, this doesn't have to be like super clean like your inoculations inside do. Now check me out. A good hard squeeze, and there's like, you know, just a few drops coming out. It's kind of like uh, basic field capacity. Um, you know, but it's really probably a little kind of like feels a little bit drier in a sense, like as far as how it feels in your hand. But that's, you know, it's fully hydrated, um, and it just holds water differently than sawdust does, or you know, coir. Um, Oftentimes, coir will hold more moisture than sawdust. Um, so you kind of got like your straws hit the bottom, and then you got coir or straw, and then um, sawdust, and then coir is kind of like your magnitudes of, you know, how much things will hold. And see, this is kind of like when you do this, you're doing like kind of like a lasagna method. I just kind of like put a layer in, throw in a little flan, give it a little squeeze, um, and then just, you know, keep moving. Um, if it wasn't so windy, this would be a lot easier today. But um, you know, you can guarantee there's a whole lot more blowing around in the air today than on a calm day. You know, because like all this wind is gonna like really stir up gas everything. And oddly enough, I would definitely place a wager on this will still work. You know, and it does. It just kills you that like if you were doing stuff like this inside, it would never work. You know, and that the main difference is like the amount of nutrition, um, and the pH. You know, like this is not like a great environment for, you know, competitors live in, and that's, you know, like that's pretty much why this is able to work. You know, um, shake a little in there, use the bag, kind of give it a crunch, crunch, squeeze, squeeze. You know, and then I take it and kind of like give it a jerk, kind of like, you know, kind of like packs it down a little bit in there without you having to touch it. Uh, and again, like we bleach cleaned our hands, but we're standing out here with the damn wind blowing, blowing all kinds of shit in our bag and onto our straw. Um, Again, this goes against like everything you would ever do properly in mycology. It's ridiculous how it works. Again, the success rate is not nearly as high, and it's, you know, um, you don't get as high a yields in your success either, per pound anyway, like per pound of substrate. Um, but you definitely out of this, you know, giant straw bag here, this will grow, you know, probably like, I don't know, if I get it good and loaded up here, probably like, you know, 3 or 4 pounds of mushrooms the first flush. Hopefully, you know, that's what you're shooting for. Um, we're gonna go ahead and use about half of our other here, and this will get us close enough. Um, you know that it'll make it worth using this giant bag here. Um, these are really like a fun little project, you know, something that's like fun to do with the younger ones in the family, you know, or like those that when you tell them that, you know, you grow mushrooms that don't even believe you and they're like, you can't grow mushrooms. You know, you can kind of like throw this at them and be like, hey, even you can grow mushrooms, you know, hey, uh, anyways, you know, like I'm just kind of going on a little rant here while I do this because it keeps me occupied. Um, that's the good start there. Oh, away, away. Inside the bucket. Yeah, the wind is crazy today, man. Um, crazy today. On the other side of my now harvested and overgrown garden, you know, like after so far into the season, when it's, you know, just weeks before harvest, I totally purposely let the garden go completely to hell. That way things grow up. And I can, you know, leave that there kind of like if you were like plant a cover crop or some shit. You know, so you can feed your soil for the next year. Um, I do that by just allowing it to grow up at the very end of the season after everything's like grown and established and all that kind of stuff. Um, I will, you know, kind of like let it just go wild the last part of the season. You know, at that point, you don't have to worry anyway. Your harvest is pretty much set already. Um, and then after the harvest, you know, I leave everything there, and when it all completely dies, um, I'll go through with the weed eater, and if I need like some shears, you know, um, and lop it all off and just leave it lay on the ground. And often that is also when I'll put down like wood chips and straw, and let it kind of like protect the ground over the winter. Um, that way in the spring when I cultivate it, you know, till it, it'll work all that down into the soil after it's had a chance to, you know, be introduced to soil microbes and all that kind of stuff, you know. Um, but anyways, on the other side of the garden, it's pine trees that and I just kind of grab the bag and squeeze it down a little bit. You don't want to like pack this real tight, like, you know, you don't definitely don't want to treat it like sawdust, because we're gonna zip tie this bag completely shut here. And you know, you'd think like, oh my God, that's totally anaerobic. And if you waited long enough, it would be, but there's enough air that's trapped in here. And, you know, I'm going to leave a headspace at the top here, of air. That way the mycelium, has oxygen, you know, to colonize. Some people go like all the way tight to the bag. Um, I don't. At the point that I'm like halfway colonized, you know, because this big bag's gonna take like 2 or 3 weeks probably. Sometimes it'll go faster, like it just depends. But um, when it's about like halfway through and it's like really loaded up with mycelium, I will pop the zip tie and then move it down closer. And the reason I do that is so oxygen remains in there. That way the mycelium can colonize it a little faster. You don't have to do this. You can tie it all, you know, zip tie it all the way down tight from the get-go. But since this has no filter patch or anything, um, you know, that's what I prefer to do. And because these are going to hang outside in the trees over here, um, you know, once we move that down and let it finish colonizing, I'll use these same trash bags I covered these buckets with and just drape over it. Probably throw this in the garage, you know, for colonization. At this point, though, it's, you know, all in a bag. You know, it's like you could really put this anywhere, um, you know, and colonize. It's not like it's going to get anything dirty or nothing like that. But there, I mean, that's how damn simple that is. And because these, I'm only doing 2 bags right now. Uh, I'm not gonna even worry about labeling them. They're both gonna hang next to each other, and when they fruit, it'll be really clear because one will be like blue or like steel gray, like a blue steely gray. Just depending on the weather and how much light they're getting. The temperature affects like blues and stuff. They can come out like really, really like gray, like silverish gray. Um, if it's like when it's hotter. But the cooler weather, like this time of year, which is pretty warm today, but by the time this colonizes and it's ready to fruit, it's going to be, probably down in like the 40s, early, low 50s for a high, and down into the 30s, at night. Uh, these will probably come out like blue, blue. I've had them come out cobalt blue before. Uh, yeah, they're really, really gorgeous. Anyways, though, you know, the pulmonarius, the brown, there's like you couldn't possibly say one. Uh, uh, and this is a little bit smaller bag, but it's plenty enough spawn. I really like for this process. I really do prefer over these to use to like spawn this to a brooding block and then use the brooding block as my spawn in there. That works so well. You do get a little better result, quicker colonization, and you are, when you're doing that, adding some soy hulls in there, so you get a little better yields. But it's absolutely not necessary. And see, I'm just, just simple as can be putting it together here. Uh, and I see this Almenarius was a little like I wouldn't call it over colonized, but it's like super consolidated. So it's just a little harder to break up. It won't affect anything. If you let it go too long, you won't get as good at yields. But I mean, you really have to like neglect it to get, you know, to put yourself at that point. And even then, it'll still fruit. With these little like fun fall outdoor projects, it's like the yield I could really care less about. Just the fact that I'm getting to be outside and hang out, mess around with the mushrooms, you know. But yeah, same thing here. I'll pin this down with my with my knee. Uh, get her back cut off here. Okay, and I'm gonna hit my mate quick here. This is something else. You don't ever, ever, ever do this with indoor inoculations. Um, I would not even have this thing, uh, within reach, or really within sight, even, because face it, like our fingernails, our hands, our mouth, our hair harbors like all the garbage that we ingest. It's in the air, everything like that. I wouldn't even want this, within 10 feet of a petri dish I'm working with. But again, this is fun day. You know, good project to do. Like I said, with the little ones. I'm actually, I'm, I'm 35. I'm going to be 36 in April, and I'm a grandpa as of last week. I started real early having kids, and my oldest boy is 19. Um, just just had my first grandbaby. It's like mind blowing, and in a few years, I'll have Buck out here. And my son, bless him and his fiance. They're great people. I love them both to death, but they named my grandson Buck. oh, why? Why would you do that? You know, like, um, they were gonna name him Marcus, and then somebody in her family, I guess, like probably like 50 years ago or some shit, was named Buck, and there was enough uh issue raised about it that they changed the name. You know, like, he's my grandbaby. I'm gonna love him no matter what. But like, that poor boy, he's gonna have to learn to fight quick, man. He's gonna get picked on in school a lot. Um, and our bunch, you know, we just don't lay down. Yeah, that's crazy. Even my little scrawny ass now, you know, like I still don't lay down. Uh, 3 surgeries in the last year, and I've lost 40, literally 40 pounds since Thanksgiving last year. Uh, I'm like a skeleton of what I used to be. But, you know, the surgeries are now finally all over, and I'm already starting to put back on little bits of weight slowly. Uh, might feel like a human being instead of a skeleton again here before long. You know, some some people want to lose weight. You know, I've never been where I needed to lose weight. You know, normally staying around 185. Uh, but uh, you know, uh, enough surgeries and you know, not being able to use your hand for several months. Um, or one hand anyway. I learned to do uh mycology work left-handed because of that. You know, wrapping up a cast and a bunch of bracing and these little like struts that held my fingers in place while you know my wrist and thumb and a bunch of tendons and muscles healed that were all cut apart. Um, you know, I was literally wrapping my hand with a brand new fresh trash bag and then sanitizing it and keeping it completely away from my work. And I learned to go slow and do everything one-handed, left-handed. Oh my God, did it take forever to subculture plates? It was like embarrassing, ridiculous, and at times I had some help, you know, like, but can't, like, I don't trust nobody to do my culture work, you know, so you end up sitting in front of the hood for like 2.5 hours while you have, you know, somebody here and there hand you stuff that you then have to, you know, sanitize immediately and uh, struggle and look like a complete idiot. Um, but you know, I mean, what else do you do? Uh, I couldn't see just like not not doing what I love. You know, that just didn't really make sense to me. So I figured out a way to do it anyway, and I actually still have a really good success rate. It just took, you know, 2.5 hours to do 30 minutes of the work. Anyways, something else like to think about is I started to make a different video last night. Just kind of talking after I got done with some you know culture work. Talking about media formulation. Your media formulation can be so widely variable as long as you stay within you know your rough basic parameters of you know like your nutrition rate um and you know depending on what exactly you're doing you may want your agar a little stiffer or heavier, I would call it. It's you know because you're to make the agar stiffer, denser, you know, harder, whatever, however you want to call it. Um, you're adding more weight in agar, so I would refer to it as heavier. Um, but like heavier plates are something I would use like for making uh spawn. Not like heavy, like you know 2%, 10 grams per 500 milliliters. Um, and I do the same thing with the nutrition rate. It's I actually do like most often like 2.5% nutrition for my plates. That it's like a good in the middle for speed of growth, density of the mycelium, because you want to have like um for your spawn, like when you're making spawn, you don't want your mycelium like super thin and wispy. It'll still work, but I want some like substance there, something that's got, you know, enough nutrition, number one, to leap off and onto the substrate. And number two, like you on too low in nutrition, and you may possibly look past a contaminant that's there because the contaminant just doesn't have enough nutrients to really grow. And yes, you want to avoid contaminants growing, but if they are there, you do want them to have something to work with, so you can spot them, and then alleviate the problem. Uh, like the super low nutrient, like 0.5% or water, water auger, that's for like uh, constant monitoring of a culture you already know is dirty. And you want the mycelium to like starve and go searching for food and like outgrow the contaminant, like as far as getting away from it, and then you capture it, you put it back on a proper plate. Uh, you that works really well. But it's a rare occasion that I have to do anything like that anymore. I can usually use the same, 2 or 2.5% plates and clean anything up just the same by subculturing at the right time from the right place, using the right techniques. So that I just really don't have much use. I keep some water auger plates around, like 4 or 5. Um, but most definitely, those same plates will sit around for like the whole year, for all the more that I need to use them. Um, Even like cloning wild culture, there's so many methods and things to do, to clean up things, or just, do it right the first time, or like some wild mushrooms are just so disgusting, like as far as from where they came from, that you have to clean them up. Um, but, for the most part, um, a couple transfers and you can about clean up anything as long as your technique was good from the beginning. Anyways, though, like, let's talk about nutrition, nutritional profiles. I'm going to do a short clip later where I'll actually show you guys some of the different nutrients and what their nutritional profiles are, as per the nutrition facts on the packaging. And nutrition profiles are like widely variable. It really kind of gives you a lot of leeway to really vary your media, to keep your mycelium guessing and to keep it from getting enzyme blindness over long periods. Stuff that you're constantly taking back to spores. Like every couple grows, you're trying for another filial generation. Um, I'm sure that quite a few of you know what I'm talking about there. Like as far as advancing filial generations, the generation terminating spore. Um, if you're trying to advance a culture or stabilize a culture, that works really well. But a lot of times with like gourmets, I take things back to spore um, and do pheno hunts and stuff like that. And I do daimon crosses, sometimes mon, but I just prefer the daimon. Um, I've had so much better results, and like uh, monokaryotic crosses where it's mon, they take a while. Like when they meet the barrage zone, I've noticed in my experience, like two monos will take a little, will take sometimes a week after they meet to shoot out a rhizo, you know, whereas like Daimon, it's like, in my experience anyway, and the cultures that I've worked with, this is not across the board. Nothing in mycology is across the board. Well, some things are, but not many. But I guess my point is you know, uh, with crosses and stuff, yeah, you're going back to spore. But once you get that culture, you're going to keep it, for quite some time. When you find something you really like, you want to store the earliest version of it that you can in your long-term storage, whichever route or routes you go for that. Um, and you are going to kind of rely on being able to go back to that original rather than advance the filial generation. Um, Mailman. So, like it's a different idea than, other breeding and mating systems that people kind of run. And you can over persevere, a few years when you're growing constantly, you're running out plates and running out plates and running out plates. Um, you know, um, to grow, 80 bags of one thing each week, every week, all year, or 20 of this, 20 of this, 20 of this, 20 of this, and you fill up your grow room, with however much you're growing, um, running the same media all the time, it will start to get like lazy on your plates. I've seen it happen. Some people try to say like, oh, that's the culture senescing. Um, Senescence is caused by mycelial expansion. Like the more you expand, the culture further out to like those T6, T7, T8, T9, T10. Some people get out at like T20. Um, like that's where you experience, enzyme blindness. Um, for sure if you're running the same media, but like you get out like that T10 and beyond, you will start to see some degradation of the culture, which I am not as intelligent as like Ed Grant, but I do know a little bit, and I do listen to very intently on some of the things that he talks about that are above me, I guess you could say. Demandingly intelligent, and that's like from my experience and from what I've read and you know picked picked up in um, things from him and several other people. Like I've got several people that I kind of look to, even at my experience level, when I have questions or just need to bounce ideas off of. Sometimes you can formulate questions in ways for someone else and answer your own questions, just by the processes. Um, and then other times, that feedback is so valuable. Um, and that's something too, like if you want to grow and get better at something, you've got to conversate with people that are above your skill level or above your base of knowledge, even. There's one or two people that I know that most definitely are far more intelligent than me. And I'm not like retarded or nothing, but I'm pretty intelligent. But I know a few people that are super, super smart, but I've got so much more experience growing than them and working with spores and other things that, um, when it comes to like techniques and things like that, they come to me even though they're more intelligent. But there's that trade-off where when I need to answer a question or confirm something that may be scientific or, like something about chemistry or biology, different things like that, then, there's the trade-off, Um, anyways, like, so senescence, that's degradation of your culture from expanding further than you want to remain the same consistent, growing culture, same morphology. As some cultures senesce, they will basically go through like mutations. And when you're trying to grow the same mushroom over and over and over because you have a customer that
wants that blue oyster mushroom, they don't want one that, is senesced or degraded to the point that the mushrooms from block to block to block are no longer the same, or they're starting to get longer stems and smaller caps, or you get them sometimes where they'll just not grow right, where you have like mutations in the caps and deformities, and that's the point that you went too far. You should have not even been growing that ladybug. Ha! You should have cleaned that up and went back to your long-term storage well before that. um some people get that whole problem and process confused with enzyme blindness, though. um and they'll have a culture that has never, since spore germination, has never been on anything but PDA. And then enough times of expanding it out to your T3, T4, T5 to make spawn and stuff like that. And then you're doing grain to grain transfers on top of that, and it's like, by the end of it, maybe you get a worthwhile mutation, or just environmentals, create a different morphology that you want to capture, and enough of the repeated environmental, change like that, and you clone something like that that's grown like that several times. You clone one or two more times, and you can actually start to change your morphology permanently on that particular cell line. That's a totally different conversation, but um, basically, most of the time, those are not good changes when you get out there like that. That's more of something where you would want to go back to spore and search for new phenotype, or in the early, passages or transfers, maybe take a little separate project and see how it responds to certain stressors, or repeated environmentals, aside from what you're doing. But you do get into problems like sticking to only one media. You're only going to be able to grow that culture for a certain number of years before it needs to be refreshed, taken back to spore, or um, bought new again from the original source, from the strain bank. Um, and you can really avoid that for so much longer by just changing up your media. Um, you don't have to do it every 100 plates like I do, um, but I pour 100 at a time. So when I pour, um, five 500 milliliter bottles, um, you know, I'm going to have 100 plates with a little bit of agar left in each bottle. Because regardless, if I have a little media left, um, I pour stacks of 10. So 500 milliliters is 20 plates, and whatever's left gets set to the side and melted later and dumped out. Just because I want consistency. And oftentimes, uh, I would rather have a little bit of extra media that I throw out than not enough and be throwing away plates and not have enough, enough plates. Because I rely on that pour of 100 every time. Also, like, I may pour 3 bottles of one media and then 2 of something else, or the other 2 both different, for different things, and or just different little projects and stuff. Um, I rotate between. Uh, I take oatmeal and blast it in the food processor and make like oatmeal flour. Um, I really like how a lot of cultures grow on it. Some cultures, are just so genetically different that they don't respond to it well, um, or as well, I guess, as other medias. But that's a whole nother conversation too. But I'll rotate from like oatmeal, yeast, dextrose at 2.5% total. Um, Rotate from that to um, potato dextrose with 0.1 grams of soy peptone. Um, and some people use peptone for fast growth where they're adding, like substantial amounts. I am literally adding 10% of 1 gram. That is so very little, but what that does is because a lot of gourmets are grown on master's mix, those soy hulls being in your substrate, uh, to run a culture, through a few of those plates here and there throughout its lifespan, um, helps kind of like uh, train it a little bit to the soy hulls, where it just colonizes faster, it responds better. It's already developed the enzyme or enzymes that it needs to digest that. Um, Especially like when I come from spore, um, I will make sure that in the first few transfers, um, or sometimes on the germination plate, that I do put that minuscule amount. It's not really enough to affect your growth on the plate. Maybe some, I guess, but no more than nutritional yeast does. But what that does later is, I do this a lot. I've noticed it's not like substantial differences, but your colonization times get a little better, a little cleaner. Um, and you know, your consolidation gets a little better, like how well it colonizes the substrate. Some myceliums are like wispy and stuff, and that's just their morphology. Like hericiums are always wispy. Um, a lot of newer growers with hericiums don't even realize that it's fully colonized, ready to fruit, and then it auto fruits in the bag and really fucks up the yield. And often, until you've grown it, for years, you don't really see the difference until you start really paying attention to your actual numbers. And then you start seeing like, hey, you know, the first flush yield was, a third of a pound less every single time that happened, or sometimes it's like a half a pound, or sometimes it'll auto fruit, and while it's waiting to go into, you know, a tent or the grow room or whatever, it's like you just wasted the first flush. And like, what's, with Hericium, like there's with all gourmets, there's going to be a definite difference between your first and second flush, harvest weights. Um, like, I mean, it's enough that it makes a difference at the end of the year. So, like learning that, and like that's another thing that like, you know, as you rotate your medias and keep that culture constantly vigorous, um, throughout your transfers. And then, like once I get out to like T6, end of the line, I don't care if it's still growing well. I'm going back to, my original, um, just to keep that at its best state. Um, and that does at some point start to affect your yield numbers too when you start getting out too far. I guess it probably could go the other way too, where maybe in some instances that it gets better, but the morphology shit, and then nobody wants to buy them because they're ugly. Hericium's kind of an ugly mushroom anyway. Um, yeah, it looks like a pom pom or a little white pillow. Like my taki, that's pretty. Oyster mushroom, pretty. Attractive, whatever you want to call it. Uh, Reishi is attractive. Lion's mane is like not. But anyways, like so rotating your media. So then I'll go to like potato dextrose, a bit of peptide, and then I'll go to like a blend between like malt extract and potato dextrose. Or I guess it's light malt extract with potato flakes. Is another formulation I use. If I'm using light malt extract, I won't use any kind of added dextrose, sucrose, honey, uh, whatever, table sugar, brown sugar, sorghum syrup. I won't mix that with light malt extract. Um, you could. There's nothing wrong with it. I just personally I don't. I really actually try to kind of stay away from light malt extract, other very small doses. Um,
There isn't any specific reason why. I just don't prefer it. Um, and I think that's because when I first started this, that's the only media I ever made was light malt extract with yeast added, or I would swap out the yeast from Peptone for the change up. Um, but I've really found too that I really like um, using brown rice flour, or I'll make my own pulse brown rice in the food process. It's so much cheaper than buying brown rice flour. Yes, it's probably a little different, but it's just the same. Um, or like boil rice. Then I'm gonna throw the rice away, but boil it for an hour. Weigh out like 80 grams for 1,000 milliliters. And boil it for an hour. Not I guess not boil it. Bring it to a boil and then simmer it for an hour. And then strain it off and keep it raw. Um, and add 10 milliliters to your just normal recipe as part of your liquid. It gives it kind of like a boost. Um, Also, something that I'm onto here lately that is like just absolutely blown my fucking mind for making media is grits. You will shit. Look at like the difference between the nutritional levels of grits and like brown rice, or grits and sorghum. Even sorghum's pretty nutritious. I buy sorghum pith, and I make, instead of using like sorghum syrup to make media, um, I take the sorghum pith and um, I'll blitz it in the food processor, make like a flour with it, kind of like I do the oats, and just leave it in a jar. Man, it takes like 5 minutes to make a quart, you know. And when you're using 11 and a half grams of nutrition total per per batch, a quart of that's gonna last a long time. It's not like you're going out of your way, or it's creating this big thing you got to do each time. It's not. It's like 5 minutes once every 3 or 6 months, depending on how much it. Wait a second, here. But you get into like the variability of the actual nutrition profile of those. It is quite substantial. Uh, it's wild, and the different enzymes that get developed within that culture. Sometimes I will purposely take a little tiny piece out of a slant, put it on a plate. Because you only need something like a hair, thin. I mean, even touching the mycelium or kind of flicking the tip of your scalpel across the top of a good healthy plate, and then just push that scalpel in another plate, and oftentimes it'll take off in there. It takes a little bit to respond when it's that small, but really surprisingly, I mean, like that's how easy it is to cross contaminate and ruin your monos like that too. Made that mistake before. I'm sure other people have too. Um, where when you're transferring monos to a plate, um, you know, to create a new dikaryon, and you transfer the wrong thing first. Um, like um, I always like after making that mistake a few times, like sometimes if I'm switching, you know, species, cultigens, I'm definitely going to like thoroughly sterilize my scalpel, like halfway up the handle between species. But between like plates and stuff, if I'm gonna take 5 transfers off one plate and put them on 5 new plates, um, I'm gonna do like 3 transfers, or I'll cut them all at once, sterilize, and then transfer them all off that same scalpel. Just boom, 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 boom. It is done. Okay. There's no need to re-sterilize right there as long as you're not contaminating your blade. It really speeds you up. Now, if you're pausing in between, sterilize your scalpel again. Um, but when it comes to like anything where I'm doing any kind of breeding at all, I don't care if I just cut on one plate and I, set the scalpel down while I adjust something, or, I mean, any number of things. I don't care just because I touch that plate with that mono. That scalpel will touch nothing else until it's been completely, like, thoroughly sterilized. Um, Same thing, like, you go walking around and you take a transfer off a dikaryotic, a dikaryon, put it on your plate, and then you go to introduce your mono. Better sterilize in between, because otherwise you're going to carry your dikaryon right to the mother plate of the mono, and now you no longer have a mono. You have a diamond pairing that just eliminated your mono. Made that mistake before, and like there's no need for that. Like once you have a good mono, you you don't need many. There's a lot of guys that are constantly pulling monos, but they're running through a lot of filial generations, searching for the unicorn. I'm not doing that. I don't care about that. I'm searching for something productive that is reliable and resistant to competitors. Colonizes quickly, proves quickly for what it is. Different species just take different amounts of time, but my approach, my end outcome is a little bit different than some other people that are breeding. And there's nothing wrong with that, man. I like everybody does their own thing. That's killer. The fact that they're doing it, the fact that I'm doing it, that's where it's at. Uh, but yeah, there's so much to think about. Like, but I will purposely pull a culture out, just a little piece of a slant or times a long-term storage file, put it on a plate of a certain media, just for that one transfer, and then cut that plate up and make another backup, another 2 or 3 cryo vials of long-term storage or another slant, and I'll just put an asterisk or something on there, so I know that it's actually technically one transfer older than all the rest, but I might have purposely used some straw water, in that media, and that cell line now from that out will be expanded to do stuff like these bags, or used in outdoor beds and stuff like that. Or if I want to switch my grain, I'll pull out one, if I'm going to use just popcorn, which I normally don't use just one grain. That's another reason I rotate my medias, is because I'm constantly using different grains. Because, when you first start, you want to grow on one grain. I'm sure the wind is totally killing the sound. I'll probably end up leaving this video. But when you first start, you want to, I guess I'll get closer here.
Just go ahead and take this guy off here. All right. When you first start, you want to pick a grain and learn to work with it. You don't want to be switching grains a bunch when you first start. You need to perfect one at a time, and then you perfect one and then want to try a different one, or say that you can't figure out one grain, or you can't, you're having trouble hydrating it properly, or getting, consistency in your sterilization where you have good batches and then a couple shit runs, and it's it's time to change grain, not because the grain's bad, just because it's not working for you. But most generally, you want to try to master, when you start to grow on a grain, I don't care if it's millet or, sorghum, which is milo, or wheat berries, rye berries, oats, popcorn, field corn, whatever. You want to get that grain and absolutely master it before you move on. But once you've, say that this year I mastered using dwarf corn, like dwarf varieties of corn that have a much smaller grain size of popcorn, like closer to sorghum size. And you've got popcorn that's now the size of sorghum. And why do we like sorghum and milo, rice? Because of the small grain size, lots of inoculation points. Well, I grew, because I didn't want to invest money into a bunch of grain and then find out I didn't like it. So I just grew some this year. And I ended up with I don't know, 60 pounds or something of, the